Hello again, guys. Welcome back to another episode of the Fighter Tales podcast. I'm joined by Phil Yates, the creator of what is sure to be an awesome air combat war game, Angels 1-6. Phil, why don't you go ahead and say hello to us and tell us all a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm Phil. It's good to be on your podcast. I'm a games designer from way back. Started as a little tyke, but I'm mostly known for Flames of War and Team Yankee and that series of games for Battlefront. I've been doing a lot of board game stuff lately, but I'm starting to release working towards releasing a aerial board game under my own steam third quarter of this year, Angels 1-6.
Awesome. So what was the original inspiration for the philosophy behind the game and how it works and whatnot? Is there anything that you took inspiration from, or?
Well, it goes back to when I was, I don't know, definitely below teens. The first thing was my mum called me one night and said, come down to the school hall. And they had I don't know what the event was, but up on the stage, they had some guys with World War I biplanes, old Airfix models and the likes, on probably about 4-foot dowels with arms on them, with little swivels on them, with the aircraft on them, and demonstrating some sort of war game there. That sort of was absolutely exciting as a primary school kid. And then I found that almost every game out there, aerial game out there, was based on Blue Max. That's the concept of I pick a maneuver, you pick a maneuver, we do our maneuver, and then we repeat, sort of thing. And that didn't, even as a kid, strike me as a really great model of aerial combat, in that either if I can see you, then I'm reacting moment by moment to what you're doing, and you're reacting moment by moment to what I'm doing. And it's not like we suddenly pick, oh, I'm going to break left, and I pick, oh, I'm going to break right, and we go off in different directions. If we did that, it would be because one of us thought there was a tactical advantage in not reacting to the other. So even then it was like, well, what do I need to make a game that works better than that? And so that the genesis of what has eventually become Angels 1-6 started way back then. I remember thinking in the car on a family drive about I go, you go, British turn, German turn, British turn, German turn type structures, and how that could work in an aerial war game. And all sorts of stuff like that. And on and off since then, it's been a thing. And Angels 1-6 itself, the mechanisms behind it, started about 20 years ago, when I was thinking, okay, so one of the big barriers to entry for a tabletop aerial war game is either it needs to have some sort of grid or something, or it needs devices for measuring curves of some sort. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking, well, how can we get around that? How can we do it with straight lines instead, which would be much, much simpler? And so I thought about the mechanisms that eventually became the maneuver mechanisms of Angels 1-6. And about 10 years ago, the whole thing was largely finished, but the biggest problem was getting it manufactured, because manufacturing in China is or was quite a tricky thing. You're trying to find somebody to make the planes, to make the stands, to print everything. And at least at the time, China didn't have the best reputation for trustworthiness when dealing with foreigners like myself. Since then, it's become a lot easier to manufacture in China, and it's sort of brought the project back to the fore, and now I'm looking forward to actually bringing it out and giving it to everybody to play with.
Awesome. Well, that kind of goes into another question I have regarding the models themselves. So what kind of scale are we working with here? Is it like 1/144 or?
1/144th. Now, okay. I'm about to duck off the screen, and I'll be back in a moment. So this is a 1/144th scale Spitfire. The sculpt is by Roman Vasiliev, I think. But anyway, he's a sculptor in Ukraine who does great work. And we've worked together to get some really nice, where's the camera, detail in these.
Oh, yeah.
They're only hand painted by me, but that's pretty much how they'll come. So they'll be fully painted except for the markings, in this case, AKH. They won't be on there, but there'll be a water slide decal that you can then stick on to make each aircraft individual. You don't really want 4 copies of AKH or whatever in your force. And they're mounted on. Now I'm going to duck off again.
Yeah. All right.
So
the
aircraft are mounted on a, and this is all prototype stuff, but mounted on a radio aerial type arrangement so that the height in the game is actually shown by the height of the model. And this is just a prototype, but the mounting allows you to position the aircraft to reflect what it's doing. Or you can just simply leave it straight and level for the whole fight. That's perfectly fine. It depends on your artistic temperaments and how visual you like your fights. But I think it's pretty cool to be able to have your aircraft climbing when it's climbing, or climbing in a bank if that's what it's up to in the game. So that's pretty exciting, and just a magnet, so very easy to get on and off for storage and so forth.
That's awesome. I mean, wargaming, in my opinion, is a very visual medium. So having the ability to actually, cant the model around on that is something you don't really see a lot in other aerial war games. I really appreciate seeing that, and that's really neat. So as far as the base goes, I did see a few prototype models of the base showing the to hit on. Do you mind showing that real quick?
Yeah, no problem. So I'll just take the aircraft back off.
Mm-hmm.
So here is, again, it's all prototype stuff, but here's the base, and this side is it. Yep. The arrow is the direction of travel. So that's the way the aircraft's moving. So even if your model is sort of slightly wonky, it'll still be, that's the game direction. And you'll see that it's an octagon. And that's because there's the measuring ruler has little slots in it that allow you to make 45-degree turns, and also to measure your movement in increments of movement. So you don't need any sort of grid or anything on the table, but you still get fairly precise maneuvering, which is quite important for an aerial game. And then you'll see here it's got, let's start at the back here. It's 3+ to hit when you're shooting an aircraft from the tail, 4+ to hit when you're shooting an aircraft from the front, and 5+ to hit on a full deflection shot. So similar to Flames of War, the target's the main determinant of the score required to hit, which gets rid of immediately a lot of interesting issues with aerial war games, because if you've got your tail to the enemy, well, it's going to be not so pretty for you. If you manage to get a full deflection shot, or them into a full deflection shot against you, you'll probably survive quite well. Of course, then there's range and height as the other two main determinants of the score required to hit. Also modified plus or minus 1 sometimes for aircraft guns that are particularly likely to score hits due to a high rate of fire, high muzzle velocity, or nose-mounted guns tend to be more accurate than wing-mounted guns and so forth. And then some of them are at -1. So a Spitfire's guns, 8 dice, no modifier, whereas an ME-109 has 2 cannon, which are going to be +1 on the score required to hit, because they're relatively slow firing, limited ammunition. There's only 60 rounds per gun, and relatively low muzzle velocity. But when they hit, they hurt. And then there's the 2 fuselage-mounted machine guns at -1 to hit. They've got 1,000 rounds a gun. a very, very high speed firing, and mounted on the aircraft fuselage, which tends to make them more accurate and easier to aim. So you've got the Spitfire going for the spray and pray method with 8 rifle caliber machine guns, and then the Messerschmitt with its 2 cannon, which you need to get in close to score a hit with, and its 2 machine guns, which are less likely to cause problems. And then while we're talking about it, the last thing that a weapon has is its firepower, as you'd expect. And so your rifle caliber stuff is all 6. So the Spitfire's got a lot of guns going out, but actually scoring that 6 to bring something down is a little harder. Whereas the 20 millimeters have firepower 4+. So you get hit by a 20 millimeter and you're starting to roll, or hope that they're not going to roll well. There's, of course, in standard Phil Yates style, a save in between, with a Spitfire and Messerschmitt giving a 5+ save, something like a 0 a 6, something like a Hurricane 4+, and you're getting down to something like a Thunderbolt with a 3+ save. You can just pump rounds into that and it'll just take it and shrug most of it off.
Wow, that's awesome. That covers a lot of what I was going to ask you about the combat system. Now, I take it this is all done with D6s exclusively.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, D6s, one, they're easy. You can always find a D6 if you haven't got the proper dice, whatever that might be. And 2, as a design mechanism, it has the advantage of focusing you on what matters. The bigger the range of possible scores with a D20 or a D100 or something, you get tempted to, and we'll add +1% for this and -3% for that. And none of them ultimately tend to make a lot of difference, apart from slowing the game down while everybody goes to a big table of modifiers. But if you focus on the things that are going to make a significant difference to the chance of hitting, then you get the important factors in and just simplify it by ignoring all of the others.
Excellent. That sounds like a pretty straightforward system. That's what I really like about the games you've put out. They're very easy to pick up and learn. And I guess one more question I have about the actual combat itself is, will the bases themselves be kind of universal, or will they be unique to individual aircraft? So like the three to hit from the tail, will that be different for bombers versus fighters and whatnot?
No, the actual stand is universal. There's no real difference. It doesn't matter what sort of aircraft it is. If you're behind it, it's easier to hit. The difference between aircraft in that sense is the difficulty in getting yourself in a good position to score a hit. A high power aircraft with a good rate of climb and good maneuverability and good everything else, the mythical flying unicorn type thing, you're going to have great difficulty in getting your guns to bear, because it's always going to be just too far off your nose, just too high, just too low, wherever it wants to be to make it difficult. And anyway, even if you do get a shot, it will be a deflection shot. Whereas if you were shooting at something that's rather lumbering, then you can predict pretty much where it's going to be next turn, and possibly even the turn after, which makes it a lot easier to get yourself into a good position that it can't do much about and get the shot. So the performance of the aircraft and the difficulty in lining up in an aircraft isn't about the actual shot once you've lined up. It's about the difficulty of lining up on an aircraft.
I like that. Okay. And as far as the aircraft like cards themselves go, I mean, I take it they're not going to be just simple, unit cards that you would see in something like Team Yankee. I've seen some photos showing like aircraft cockpit aesthetics. Is that like how's the layout on those? Like, how does that work?
Okay. Next time I am going to get my props organized, but I'm going to disappear for a moment.
No worries.
Here is a Spitfire cockpit. And so you've got 3 resources in the game. Now I'm just going to try and put this somewhere where I can actually see what I'm doing. So your resources are your airspeed. So you have an airspeed indicator. Oops, that's flopping around a bit when I hold it upright. Your actions, and of course the height on the model itself. And you can trade airspeed for height and height for airspeed, as you'd expect. And your actions reflect the pilot awareness. and that's random per turn. You roll 3 skill checks and add 2, and that's how many actions you get for the turn. So a highly skilled pilot is highly likely to have a bunch of actions, whereas a green pilot is likely to be desperately trying to keep up with the situation and unable to do much. But there are moments when an ace pilot is just looking around the sky going, where'd everybody go? And they're in trouble. And occasionally a beginner will have a moment of brilliance where they've just seen what's going on and are ready to go. So the other thing about this is we have, so we have, there's the gun stats I was talking about.
Yeah.
And then running across here, we have basically the entire game. So the turn basically consists of just running across that. I'll try and hold it up and talk at the same time. Maybe I can be clever like that. So you start after rolling for your actions with getting power or drag, depending on whether you're above or below your maximum speed. And different aircraft have more power or less power, and recover, therefore, from maneuvers better. Then you can shoot. Shooting is straightforward, like literally straightforward. There's no arc of fire or anything. If you're lined up, you're lined up. If you're not lined up, you're not lined up. And then you can do a break turn. A break turn is just a 45-degree turn, which, surprise, surprise, there's a useful 45-degree turn indicator built into the base. And that's basically determined largely by roll rate. The better your roll rate, the easier it is to get into a break turn. We'll ignore split S for the moment because it's not really that useful in combat in most cases. And then you can shoot again. So if you're already lined up, you shoot, don't do a break turn, and shoot again. If you're not lined up but close, you can do a break and then shoot. And then we come across to climbing and diving. You can climb and dive as many times as you like, but of course you run out of airspeed or altitude pretty quickly. And then whatever's left on your airspeed indicator here is what you're going to move. So I mentioned the ruler. So basically you just line the ruler up with your aircraft, 1, 2, 3, usually while actually flying in the direction of the aircraft's pointing. But, and then, so whatever you've got left, that's as fast as you go. You can't have no choice about that. And then at this end, we have turns. Turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, and Immelman, again, we'll ignore that. It's not that useful in combat mostly. And you can shoot again. Now, these all cost a combination of airspeed and actions. So basically, everything you do takes up some of your situational awareness. And then a lot of things take up airspeed as well. So you can be fully aware of your situation, but if you're low and slow, you've got, even with the engine power taking you up a bit, unless you have a rocket like the later 109s, you're going to be limited by the fact that you started with no airspeed. In the case of a Spitfire, you gain 3, which will take you up to 5. I think there's 5 there. Mm-hmm. And then you start doing things like, oh, I'm going to do a break turn. Okay, now we're starting to seriously run out of speed. And there's not much you can do. You certainly can't climb from this because you've only got 1 speed left to work with. So, you burn some of your actions, then you move whatever you've got left, and then you turn. So the roll rate of an aircraft, as a very rough indicator, is somewhat related to the wings, in that 2 aircraft, one with huge wings and one with tiny wings. The one with tiny wings, assuming the engineers have got everything right, is probably going to roll a lot faster because there's less mass less leverage on the wing mass being in tight. So you get something like the Focke-Wulf 190, which rolls like a demon, and it takes 1 action to roll that. Something like the Spitfire, which is fairly average, it takes 2 actions to roll. Something like the Zero or the Hurricane with their big, big wings takes 3 actions to roll. So some aircraft are going to be doing break turns all over the place, like the 190. getting a quick roll and off on a different direction on that is very easy. Some aircraft like the Zero or the Hurricane are not going to be so inclined to try and pull a quick brake turn. On the other hand, when you get to the turning at the end of the move, and this is what I was talking about by replacing curves with straight lines, that's where something like the Zero or the Hurricane come into their own. They don't take much speed up to turn 45, 90, or even 135 degrees at the end of their movement. Whereas something like the Focke-Wulf would have to be in a dive to be able to pull a 135 degree turn at the end of its move, because it's high wing loading, small wings, mean that it basically, to use a non-technical term, it hasn't got much grip on the air. Your guys, audience, I'm sure, will know much better than that terminology, but I'll use it for the moment anyway.
Okay.
So it's going to lose a lot of speed trying to hold a turn, whereas something like the Zero or the Hurricane can turn much better. So the Focke-Wulf is going to do a quick nip and then do something, whereas the Hurricane will move in a much more predictable form, and then at the end of its move, it will turn, reflecting sort of a curve, or going that way probably compared with what I just did. And so you get the different handling performance of different aircraft.
Well, that's excellent. So the game kind of really emphasizes energy management in terms of, doing your maneuvers and whatnot.
Yeah, but not in the sense of boom and zoom being the only way to manage energy.
Right.
If you have a turn and burn fighter, then it's still about energy management, but that energy management is about how long can you hold that tight turn before you start falling out of the sky. And unfortunately, a lot of energy fighters don't have big enough engines to pull that off. The Zero is unusual in that it has quite a good power to weight ratio, which one of the things that makes it such a good turn and burn fighter.
Wow. Okay. And, mentioning the Zero, I guess that brings me to my next point. So you're releasing the Battle of Britain first. So what exactly are we getting in this initial release?
Okay. So the core box will have 2 Spitfires, 2 Messerschmitts, the stands, the cockpits. Talking about the stands not being customized, but the cockpits are. So this one doesn't quite match the aircraft. This is AKK instead of AKH. But each cockpit will have a little spot here to put a little ID sticker on, so that, of course, you can tie your cockpit to your aircraft during the game. I'll come back to that in a moment. But so you get 2 Spitfires, 2 Messerschmitts, all the stands, cockpits, and so forth, and a quick start rule guide, and then the actual rule book itself. Dice, and all the other sundry, and a ruler and other sundries that you might need. So then it's going to Kickstarter, so stretch goals are clearly one of the things you'd expect. Assuming that the funding goes up, we're going to see a pair of Spitfires, then a pair of Messerschmitts as separate boxes, so that you can either increase the number of aircraft you have of each type, or if your friend has a box and you want Spitfires, you can buy some Spitfires. Then a pair of Hurricanes, a pair of Me-110 twin-engine heavy fighters. Back earlier, there'll be a campaign booklet which has the campaign, which is in 4 parts: the Dunkirk evacuation, then the Battle of the Channel when the Germans were trying to shut down British shipping through the Channel, then the Battle of the Airfields when the Germans were trying to shut down the British airfields, and then the London raids. And each of those will have missions that reflect how that works. And punch out cardboard bombers and targets. So the bombers will just be a pair of mounted on a pair of triangles that slot together, and then a flat cardboard bomber on the top, but it gives you a target to chase. And then targets on the ground either to strafe or to escort the bombers to, and so forth. There'll also be a bomber pack, and that will start with a Heinkel 111 and a pair of Stukas. But then as the stretch goals get reached, it'll add a Handley Page Hampton, which is the British equivalent of the Heinkel, and then eventually a pair of Blackburn Skuas, from the Royal Navy. The British actually used them as dive bombers against both targets in France or in Belgium, like trying to knock out bridges that the Germans were using, but more importantly, to try and knock out the oil tanks in the Channel ports and in Norway. The Germans were set to capture a huge amount of perfectly good oil, which the British really didn't want them to get. So they were trying to knock them out, but they couldn't just bomb the areas because they were full of Belgian and Dutch and French and Norwegian civilians, and they were all allies at the time. And so they called in the dive bombers to try and knock out the oil tanks with some precision bombing. So what you get in the bomber pack goes up and up and up, with the price remaining the same.
Great.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Now, I'll jump back a moment, though. Yep. You get a pair of Spitfires and a pair of Messerschmitts, and that's because the game is designed so that you can fly multiple aircraft. If you want to fly, sorry, try that again. If you want to fly a single aircraft in a dogfight, then a computer game is probably the way to go. There's no way a board game or tabletop game can match that. But the problem with flying a computer sim, if you want a wingman, you've got to find somebody who's willing to sit on your tail all day and let you do all the glory stuff. Whereas I wanted to be able to experiment and explore tactics. So you can easily fly, once you know what you're doing, 4 aircraft and try out a Finger 4, or try out Vic with a Weaver, or a pair of THAC weaving Wildcats and all that sort of thing. So you can command a whole flight and get to actually have your own wingman and even a second echelon covering the first and so forth. But you still get all the excitement because you're still the guy up front. Or you can play it multiplayer. But the shooting is designed to be very quick in that there is no hit points or anything. A successful hit ends the aircraft for the game. It's gone.
Oh, wow.
So you can play a 4 aircraft aside to play a game in half an hour to an hour, and therefore play a campaign in an afternoon, or just get in a quick lunchtime game. So yeah, it's not about the one dogfight. It's about the flight. Losing an aircraft, hopefully, well, you had your other aircraft positioned to take advantage of whatever situation you let your first one get into, or maybe it was a lucky shot, and you're ready to get revenge. Either that, or you better pick up the pace with the remaining aircraft and see what you can do.
Excellent. So, as far as moving beyond the Battle of Britain, are you looking to do just the Battle Midway? Are you looking to eventually release packs of different aircraft from different periods and whatnot? Or
yep, assuming that the first Kickstarter goes well, then in the months following that, I will be doing a Kickstarter for the Battle of Midway. I'm already getting the sculpts for a Wildcat and a Zero on the list to be sculpted, on the assumption that it's going to go that well. So that will be another core set with a pair of Wildcats, a pair of Zeros, and all the follow-on material. And then there'll be another one and another one and another one after that.
Okay, and do you plan on doing anything aside from World War II, say going into Korea? I know this is probably very gun-heavy based combat, so probably like Korea would be the farthest I would imagine this rule set extends to, but that's just my assumption.
Yeah, Korea would be no real problem at all. At the moment, my anticipation of the third one would be 1945 over Germany. So we'll see some jets, and again, depending on how successful we are, definitely the 262, but possibly a P-80 and a Meteor, or even a Vampire and some of the other things. But then taking that across to Korea, you've got quite interesting and different challenges for that period. Your minimum speeds drop off. Your weaponry doesn't improve much, but the power of your aircraft is starting to pick up, but the maneuverability is somewhat down. And it just produces a different result. moving on to some of the 50s and 60s actions, you could probably get those working okay without any great difficulty. Missiles is something that I've thought about but haven't really gone into, so we won't be getting into the missile age in the near future. But there's plenty of World War II stuff to cover before that. So.
Oh, most definitely. And I imagine with jets, you're probably going to need a pretty big table there, folks. So,
Um, I'm not sure. I don't
really?
necessarily think so because um, you're going to, no matter what you do, you're going to have to turn around and come back again
Yeah.
because your opponent is going to be turning and so forth. And while, turn and burn isn't what jets like to do, it is a reality that once you've merged with a opponent, you need to find some way of getting them off your tail. And a straight line climb or dive, depending on their relative performance, might help. But eventually, you're going to have to pull into a hard turn and try and get out of their line, or do a vertical maneuver. But your vertical maneuvers tend to be less effective unless you've already got separation. So you are going to see aircraft often operating down towards the lower end of their speed ranges, as tends to happen once you get into a close dogfight with a gun-armed aircraft. So while you might race across the table in a high-speed pass a little faster, at the end of it, you're going to be pulling up and burning an awful lot of energy to get that height back, and or depending on what's going on around you, trying to pull into some tight maneuvers to try and bring your nose to bear on whatever you want for your next pass. So my experience with, not with quite the Korea era stuff, but the very fast aircraft at the end of World War II is, yep, sometimes they make very fast slashes across the table, but they pretty quickly end up throwing all of that energy either into height or into maneuvers. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll say I honestly can't wait to play this and get a copy of my own. Now, once the Kickstarter's funded, provided all that goes smoothly, do you have any ideas for a release window yet, or is that still kind of up in the air, for a lack of a better term?
At the moment, I'm working with the manufacturer to get production samples. So my intention is that the moment that Kickstarter gives me the money, I will be telling the manufacturer to start producing.
Excellent. Alrighty. Well, guys, if you're listening to this, by all means, check out the Kickstarter. I'll put the link in the description below. Phil, this has been a great talk. I am so excited for this game, and I'll be happy to get it in my hands when it comes out.
Great.
So thank you for being here today.
Thank you for the chance to talk to you and your audience.
Well, thank you much. Alrighty. Well, you have a wonderful evening.
You too. Bye.
Thank you.